Welcome back all of you. Continuing with the part of strategic environmental assessment. Previously we saw what is the process, the flow chart, how it is different from EIA and at what stage with respect to any project SEA should be implemented. So, today we will cover one case study from India where initially a strategic environmental assessment was not applied. In fact, just a EIA was done and that too a preliminary one, but then there was a need which arose and which compelled the project proposers to apply this tool of strategic environmental assessment, and then once this was applied the project continued successfully over the next 15-20 years. So, this case study is about Dhamra port on Bay of Bengal in Bhadrak district of Odisha, and presently it is owned by Adani Ports. So, as you can see from the picture, like it is a major port, okay. It is huge, and what is the purpose of the port? It is used mainly for import and export of various huge size cargo material, mainly the minerals like iron ore, steel, copper, aluminum, bauxite. So, those mineral ores are imported or exported through these ports, and having a port on the coast in the Odisha region, which is a mineral rich area, it was a very good strategy so far as infrastructure development of India was concerned. Okay. So, some technical specifications of this port, it is like its channel depth was almost 18 meters and navigational length of this port is around 18 kilometer. So, it is not a minor port, it is a major port, and the vessel capacity is super cape size. It is like one of the biggest size vehicles. So, where the overall length is around 290 meters and the height of that beam is around 47-48 meters. So, it comes under the category of major port, major project. The phase 1 of this project was completed in 2008 with 25 MTPA, like, and phase 2 it completed 10 years later, where the capacity was 4 times multiplied, and I think they plan to do the phase 3 by 2030, again going by 3 to 4 times higher capacity. So, now this is a project which is, as you can see, it is definitely affecting the water component of the environment and some part of air because of some possible emissions. The challenge for this project was because of its location and the significance of those locations. This port which was identified at an area which was very close to this beach and the, I think, wetlands or biodiversity park. So, first of all, was this project needed? Yes, it was needed as a part of development of our country. India required deep water port infrastructure to facilitate import and export of those big cargo materials. But then the location which was chosen in Odisha on Bay of Bengal, it was very close to this olive ridley turtles habitat, which is Gahirmata beach in Odisha. It is home to one of the world's largest mass nesting sites for olive ridley sea turtles, and it is an endangered species. Hope you know the endangered species, which where we need to be careful and protect them for getting extinct. And in India they come under the category of Schedule 1 protection, and this beach was almost 50 kilometer away. So, for a major project, a port size project which has that 18 kilometer navigational length, something within 50 kilometers of boundary was a very close proximity. And for these olive ridley turtles, there is a global conservation priority and India's responsibility also, because this comes under Indian territory. So, these are some pictures which shows the ridley, the olive ridley turtles in on the, like, one is there walking on the beach and one is in the swimming. I think it is a picture taken along with the corals. So, there are around 350,000 plus turtles which nest annually at Gahirmata. So, this was one significant point which was raised as a challenge by NGOs and environmentalists against this against the approval for this project. And second point was the closeness to Bhitarkanika mangroves, or it is a Ramsar site, Ramsar wetland. It is very rich mangroves and a good habitat for crocodiles. So, because of this port, the and impacts were envisioned on water quality or wildlife and habitat and the land use change. So, these two ecologically sensitive areas were very close to the proposed ports project, and that is why it attracted a lot of national and international attention. So, what happened? The problems where it went wrong. So, initially Dhamra port was classified as a minor port, and because it was proposed as a minor port, it exempted it from the stringent EIA process, because if had it been a major port, the EIA would have been very comprehensive and stringent. So, for this minor port, only a project level EIA was carried out and the approval was obtained, and the port was, the commissioning process had started. So, when it was known that it is a major project, it stressed the need for SEA, the strategic environmental assessment. Had SEA been done at much early level, it would have clearly told whether project level EIA is required or a more stringent comprehensive EIA is required, and before that is there a need for SEA as well as coastal zone planning, because it comes in the coastal region before the project. So, there was a lot of criticism from turtle biologists, NGOs, and after facing this criticism, the Dhamra port owners or the company which was dealing with it, they invited International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN. It is a international level organization which looks after the conservation of different biodiversity and species which are endangered all over the world. So, when they invited them, it sort of like pacified the people or the criticizing section of society, and they thought like maybe with the involvement of IUCN, things would get rectified now. So, with their involvement, it was sort of like partnership we started in 2005, and initially like even though presently Dhamra port is owned by Adani Ports, initially it was a venture of jointly by Tata Steel and L&T JV. So, there was a partnership inception between IUCN and Dhamra Port Company in 2005, and they set up a mission framework where the objective was to avoid, minimize, mitigate impacts on turtles and offset any residual unavoidable impacts. So, mainly focusing on turtles, because those were the endangered species and that comes under the area of IUCN. The funding model was cost reimbursement basis. The project bears environment compliance cost. So, if there is any cost related to the compliance of environmental things, the funding model was the project would bear those costs, and the success metric was 20-year operational continuity with maintained turtle populations. So, if we know that at present the population of turtle is say 350,000, and over a period of 20 years with their cooperation and under this mission framework, if the population is maintained, it would be counted for as a success metric, that whatever project activities are happening at the Dhamra port, it is not significantly affecting the endangered species or the other habitats. So, although not labeled under Indian law as sustainable like strategic environmental assessment, this whole this whole activity was effectively a voluntary strategic assessment process, okay, at policy level and at plan level for port and coastal development. Let us look at like what aspects of SEA went into while planning and performing like SEA for this particular case study. So, SEA application in development and conservation partnership. So, development, it was done by the Dhamra Port Company. Conservation, it was looked up after by IUCN, and together partnership, they looked after this project for 20 years and kept reporting data on turtles and biodiversity on a regular basis. So, the first thing which happened was stakeholder engagement. Again, these are the aspects of strategic environmental assessment. So, when stakeholders were engaged, Tata Steel and IUCN partnered for collaborative assessment. Then second was science based analysis. They did some comprehensive environmental studies, did some baseline monitoring protocols. They measured, identified the number of turtles, identified the area in which turtles nest, identified the wetlands area, the proximity, measured the effects of port activities and to what distances those effects are visualized and to what intensity. If there are any impacts, what are the mitigation measures? So, environmental management plan with a 20-year operational safeguards was proposed, and along with this there was monitoring and verification for long term turtle population tracking, ecosystem health assessment, followed by adaptive management, one of the final steps of SEA flowchart if you remember in that PPP thing. So, adaptive management is for continuous improvement with 2025 60% performance score certification. So, in 2025 recently 60% is the performance score given to this collaborative partnership, which was acceptable and almost 25% higher than what was expected. So, if you look at the results, so mid-term assessment score at present it is around 60%. So, it is well above 25% minimum threshold, and the rating of this project so far as environmental impact or the impact on population of endangered species or its habitat is concerned, so rating is adequate. So, there were 8 different criteria under IUCN standards, and this is recently, I think in this month only, November 2025, Tata Steel press release showed these numbers related to this project, the partnership project with IUCN for Dhamra port. So, because of these findings and this continuous SEA being employed and implemented, the port is successfully operational now with modern infrastructure. It does lot of import and export of big cargo materials like different iron or different minerals and ores, and it is helping like grow Indian economy. Olive ridley populations has been maintained. The mass nesting at the identified beach at Gahirmata beach, it is still continues. The population is almost similar, that is 350,000 plus. The environmental management plan which is in place that ensures that compliance to different parameters like emissions, biodiversity, the impact on the land use, they are with conservation standards. Okay. And then this development conservation collaborative partnership, it actually set the model for other large footprint industries which are looking for implementing sustainable practices in their projects. So, with those results, though the port is functional, operational, good for the country, and even though the findings and results reveal that there has been no significant damage to ecosystems of turtles and their population, there have been some challenges during implementation of SEA, particularly for this project, and those are, some of them are listed here. One was political commitment for early stage integration. So, when SEA has to be implemented, it needs the commitment of different partners, like while formulating the policies that would go into implementing or developing that project. So, the early stage integration needs lot of commitment on that front. So, the policies, plannings and programming strategies or decision making of both the partners are aligned to each other's interests or each other's expectations. The data and capacity gaps in developing regions. So, since it was a new site identified for the project and earlier no such project was there in that area, so there has been no such data collection in those regions. So, when some new projects come up in a developing region, it needs a lot of time and infrastructure for collecting the data and the capacity gaps. Balancing urgent development needs with long term sustainability. SEA, the process itself takes time, it is strategic in nature, but for any project, if the development need is urgent and if they are going to have impact which may last for a long time. So, in that case, how to balance those urgent needs with long term sustainability, that becomes challenging. And then ensuring genuine stakeholder participation and not just consultation. So, since SEA is about screening, scoping and identifying the best set of PPPs, all the stakeholders which are involved in that process, they need to participate actively and not just be consulted towards the end of the activity whether whether the policies and plans are proper or not. So, to ensure genuine participation from all the stakeholders right from the beginning is also a big challenge. But anyway, for this project, even though it turned out to be successful, like not much impact on the environment like in the adverse way, there were lots of critiques also. The first critique comes, SEA began too late. if you look at the definition of SEA, it comes much before the project, is not it? At the project level, it is a EIA. So, in this particular case, SEA began too late after the site and construction were already decided. This should have been done before that. Then there is no mandatory SEA framework in India. So, decisions were basically relying on the project level EIAs. Okay. So, now that is the thing which has some legal, it is a legal issue or a political issue, because EIA is mandatory in India. SEA, or nowadays we talk about ESG, environmental social governance, these things are not mandatory, there is no mandatory framework. It does not mean that companies are not following these frameworks. There are many companies in India which go for SEA frameworks, ESG framework, okay, in addition to doing project level EIAs, but at present there is no mandatory SEA framework, and that may be one of the reasons why for such a major project which was related to like coastal zone, there was no need identified for SEA. Also, when these things were pointed out and the project proposers decided to rectify their mistake, the partnership which they came up with, IUCN, it added the legitimacy, but again without reconsidering the risky site. So, IUCN was partnered with the Dhamra port proposers, but the partnership was mainly for considering or checking that the turtle population or habitat are not impacted by the project which is already approved at a site. Okay. That but this should have been before the site is finalized. Okay. Had IUCN be consulted before the site is finalized, the recommendations might have been on changing the site or finding a more suitable site. But in this case, site was finalized, the construction design planning phase were decided, and then when IUCN was involved, the focus shifted to like proving or like inspecting whether the existing site is going to have significant impact on turtles and their habitat or not. And fortunately, it turned out to be like it is not having significant impact, and it is within the acceptable range of as per sustainability score or the 8 criterias of IUCN. So, it turned out to be a positive outcome, but yeah, these are some of the critiques of this case study. So, I think that was one case study for SEA, but there are many more case studies. We will just look at a couple of more case studies in India. One is for Uttarakhand hydropower project, and another is for Delhi master plan of like say 20 years, 2021 to 2041. Uttarakhand, it is a hilly state. Roorkee is one of the towns in Uttarakhand, and IIT Roorkee I think is IIT in Uttarakhand. So, it is a hilly state and it has river Ganga and many of its tributaries. So, it has a huge potential for hydropower, and there are a lot of like large hydropower as well as several small hydropower projects in the state of Uttarakhand. So, under different parameters, when this SEA studies were involved, scope, trigger, main focus, like trigger means what cost, like what drived the project proposals to go for SEA for this particular projects, the focus, the methods used, the key outcomes, and whether it was relevant or not to do SEA. So, for Uttarakhand hydropower, the Alaknanda, Bhagirathi and Ganga river basins is the region where after 2013 floods, the Supreme Court and Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change, they gave the directives to find the impacts of hydropower projects, to quantify the environmental flows associated with those 70 plus hydropower projects and identify the disaster risk. So, the methods used to identify those cumulative impacts of 70 plus hydropower projects were basin modeling, the e-flow assessment, sediment and biodiversity studies. And the key outcomes which came out of this activity, the projects in high impact zones were banned. So, where we would have like say the landslide prone zones or the cloud burst prone zones, if there are projects like if it is a wetland very close to the like very like special biodiversity, like endangered species are there. So, in those regions the projects were banned, it mandated e-flows and disaster restrictions were put in place. So, the relevance for SEA in this case study was it shows the need for basin level strategic assessment. Okay. For each of these basins Alaknanda, Bhagirathi and Ganga, there was a need for SEA to identify whether a hydropower project should be thought of at a particular location or not. Similarly, for Delhi master plan, the scope region was Delhi NCR, the urban and the semi or peri-urban region, and the trigger there was a need to integrate environment into the planning, the urban planning or the city's master planning, and the focus was air quality, water resources, land use zoning, transport, green cover, everything should be properly balanced. So, the methods used were scenario analysis, carrying capacity models, land use models, and integration of transport, mainly the public transportation including the lines of metros, the public trans buses, and the key outcomes was the set of environmental guidelines were given for different zoning, mobility, green spaces, water and waste management. So, this particular case study highlighted the application of strategic environmental assessment concepts in urban planning. Okay. Similar to these two case studies, there are many more case studies which had either a fully, what we say, like a full comprehensive SEA being implemented for those case studies, or some elements of SEA being incorporated in the decision making process, after which the project level EIAs were done. Okay. So, with that, let us summarize. So, we started with strategic environmental assessment and the difference between SEA and EIA and SEA process. I think this were covered in the previous lecture, but in today's we studied the case studies, the mainly one for the Dhamra port, how the collaborative partnership between IUCN and the Dhamra port company took care of the environmental concerns before the project level EIA is done, like following the concepts of SEA, like mainly at policy programming and planning stage. This changed the guidelines, they monitored the effect on the turtles population, the habitat, the wetland, and continued this exercise on on their own funding model basis to report the successful or the acceptable sustainability score of 60%, and it shows that okay, the port is not adversely affecting the endangered species or its habitat. So, and then we also saw a couple of more case studies from Uttarakhand's river basins which can be used for hydropower projects, and Delhi's master plan to balance its air, water, waste management and other things. So, the SEA can be incorporated for new hydropower projects as well as for new urban planning models. So, with that we will stop here. Thank you so much.